Hello everyone, welcome back to Mr. Radden. You're not crazy, it just seems that way. I apologise for not doing a video for a while, but I do appreciate all my subscribers. And if you're not subscribed yet, please feel free to, and hit the like button. I'm afraid I can't put any footage up, just in case of copyright, so I'm afraid you'll have to put up with me. Anyway, let's see if we can have some fun with this. It begins with a group of people, including some police, watching the main character, Adrian Monk. He's observing the crime scene of what looks like a murdered woman. And the first thing that Monk worries about, and this must have been an OCD joke by the writers, is his stove. More accurately, his own stove. He's worried that he left it on. And when he asks about the stove, one of the police assumes he means the stove in the apartment they're currently in, and Monk says, "No, I mean mine. I think I left mine on." One of the others in the group, Sharona, Monk's nurse, he says, "You did turn off the little knob, right? You sure?" To which she replies, "Yes, I checked all the knobs." But you know, that's how a lot of people with OCD are. Then, getting back on track, Monk explains to everyone that it wasn't a burglary. It was only meant to look like one. And the guy who broke in apparently wore slippers, so he couldn't leave any shoe prints. Nice observation. Then Monk does something else, which I've been prone to do myself in the past, and he taps the lamp that's in the apartment until he's told to stop so he can get back on track. Then Monk goes through some other details the others haven't noticed, but then he says he can't concentrate because he thinks he smells gas. He's referring to the gas from his own stove a drive away back in the city. It doesn't make any sense that he would smell gas from that far away from his own apartment, but OCD doesn't care. And then he says to Sharona, "Did you hear the knob click off? Because you can't just feel it, you have to hear that noise as well." Then he finally gets back on track, and it turns out that the name of the murdered woman is a Miss Vasquez. And then back onto the issue about his stove, which he's still completely unsure about whether or not it's turned off, even though Sharona keeps insisting that she did. And it is off. Not good enough for Monk. And even if the stove was still on, there is no way he would have smelled gas all the way from where his apartment was with where he currently is. It's just not plausible. But like I said, OCD doesn't care about details like that. If it feels like it's still on, then you have to check. Even though Sharona says, just move on from the stove. Just move on from it. Just get back on track. Which is easier said than done when your OCD says otherwise and your brain keeps going around in circles over the same thing. She basically says that the others in the room think he's nuts, and they will both end up unemployed if he doesn't knock it off. And that, my friends, is a really big nightmare for OCD sufferers in reality. She tells him to pull himself together, to be brilliant. And I'm pretty sure that Adrian Monk is a very intelligent person. Monk then proceeds with other little details of the crime scene that the others, once again, haven't noticed. And then, when it's time to leave, you guessed it, he wants to go back to his apartment to check his stove. In Monk's apartment, we see a picture of Monk with his wife, and it turns out he'd been married for 7 years. He also talks to his therapist about being back on the force. Monk has noticed that the therapist has left just one cushion face down, unlike all the others, which are upright and all completely tidied up. It's a test, of course, even though the therapist won't admit that, but the question is, will Monk leave it alone, or will he have to put the cushion upright with all the others? You already know. And he also briefly touches a plant. In the following scene, there's some mystery man wearing white decorator clothes, and he pulls out a sniper rifle. And then he heads to the window where there seems to be a grand parade. The sniper shoots the bodyguard of St. Clair, the guy running for mayor who's just given a speech. And who do you think the captain of police has been asked to put on this shooter case? You got it. The question is, will this help Monk get back on the force? The captain tells Monk that he wants Monk to stay out of the way, but Monk decides to pick that moment to tell the captain that he knows that he and his wife have been having problems. Well, what a way to poke the hornet's nest, Monk. The captain is not impressed, and I cringed. The captain denies it, but then Monk points to these little details of how he knows that the captain and his wife have been separated. And then the captain tells Monk that he wants him to be quiet again. That must have stung the captain. While Mr. Lloyd, who works for St. Clair, the guy running to be mayor, debates with his people about safety, Monk is looking around the room, making small tweaks because of his OCD. One of these tweaks is he moves one of the boards closer to the other one. Nice attention to detail there, I admit. The kind of thing that OCD sufferers in real life might do. He also sorts out some paperwork, straightening up the paper, and he moves the pins on one of the boards to tidy them up, or at least tidy them up as far as he's concerned. This annoys Lloyd, who gets into basically a fuss and a small fight with Monk over the board, and Monk insists that he can put the pins back, but Lloyd tells him to leave it. They get into a tussle over who should let go of the board first, and Sharona says, Monk, just let go. So Monk does, and all the pins go flying everywhere. The mayor's wife mocks Monk over this incident, asking, well, was he dropped in his head at birth or something? Seriously, lady, if you're going to mock someone for having OCD and serious anxiety, at least get your facts straight. Sharona, Monk's nurse, shuts her down, however, by explaining the real reason why Monk is in his current state. It's because 4 years earlier, Monk's wife was killed in a car explosion. Now, if I get this correctly, if I understand correctly, an incident like that can cause severe trauma, which can make the brain snap. So it's understandable why Monk is in his current predicament, why his brain is now the way it is, with all this anxiety he has. It would have been really hard to take. Monk then spends time putting all the pins back exactly where they were before on the board, surprising everyone. Not Sharona though, because she knows he can do that, but that's one heck of a memory. He then asks where the sniper's shots were fired from, so that's where they go next. Rona tells the police that Monk is now going to do his Sherlock Holmes thing. Okay, Monk, let's see what you got. Monk analyses the window, and he says that the sniper studied his shot using a drawstring, which he got from the manual for Green Berets and Special Forces. Monk then points out a few other details which make the captain laugh. For example, how tall the sniper was, a height that not many other men are, and also remember the slippers from the beginning of the episode. And also apparently the sniper smoked a particular brand of cigarette. Unfortunately, at this point, Monk gets a dizzy spell from vertigo when he looks a bit too far outside the window, so Sharona has to help him to leave the room. In the next scene, Monk is at a funeral, which is of the bodyguard who got shot, I believe, and during the speech, Monk is fidgeting because he's worried that he's lost his keys, or more accurately, his keychain, which his wife Trudy gave to him. Monk finds the keychain, and fortunately he's fidgeting so hard he drops them from the balcony and they land, guess where? On the corpse in the casket below. Monk, he's desperate to get the keys back, obviously, because they were given to him by his former spouse, and he asks Sharona to pass him a paperclip nearby. She hesitates but gives it to him. She knows what he's up to, and she says, "You're going to hell." Monk says, "I'm already there." He takes some wire, puts the paperclip on the end of the wire, and then slowly lowers it off the balcony to the corpse below. And he thinks that he's got the keys. Unfortunately, instead, the paperclip snags the sleeve of the dead guy. After the speech is over, there's a salute for the dead man, and that's the exact moment when Monk yanks up the wire and pulls up the dead man's arm as well, making it look like the corpse is waving to everyone in church. Awkward. After that, the mayor's wife scolds Monk and says, "Do you just stay awake at night thinking of ways to sabotage my husband's campaign or something?" And Monk replies, "At night, I try not to think at all." Yeah, I'm with you there, pal. Monk points out that the sniper's weapon was British, and they're not going to let the mayor's wife go, so they're going to follow the money. In other words, interrogate the wife. They go to visit the mayor's wife, who is currently reading to kids for publicity, of course, not for the goodness of her heart. Well, she could be a cool person despite how she behaves. Anyway, while they are waiting for her to finish reading, a kid coughs his head off and another one picks his nose, making Monk freak out. While they're talking with the mayor's wife, Monk tries to sit on the kid's chair and falls off because it's too small for his big rear. She says, "Are you accusing me of something?" "Yeah, he's accusing you of something." And Monk asks, "Why? Do you have something to be guilty of?" Monk says, "I can listen to you, but I don't have to believe you." It's a good point. She gets all huffy and says, "You know what? I'm leaving." Monk tries to stand up as well, but the kid's chair is still stuck to his butt. There's a pretty sight. Monk's told about some information that he needs by a kid. Unfortunately, the kid is incapacitated, and at the crime scene, Monk can't go to the car where the kid was killed because he's wearing the wrong shoes. Whoopsie. Which doesn't impress the captain. Monk then says that the information they need was in the kid's hat, but the dilemma is the kid wasn't wearing a hat. So what to do? While Sharona is on a date, Monk is watching the footage of the shooting, but then Gate crashes Sharona's date to talk to her about the footage because something about it just doesn't add up. And then he explains to Sharona that her date has been lying to her. Whoa, that's awkward. To make Sharona say that she's quitting being Monk's nurse. She also has a son to worry about. And when Monk says, "I'll never forget you," she replies, "You never forget anything." Ouch. You see a newspaper which says Monk Unsolved, which is about Monk's wife. The unsolved case is still open about how she was killed, so I'm guessing the writers will come to that later. But in the meantime, the information was found in the kid's hat, which was wedged in the passenger seat. So Monk was right, again, meaning the captain needs Monk back, which also means that they need Monk's nurse back, so Monk can get back on the case. Sharona finds Monk playing an instrument at his wife's grave. Apparently he's playing their song. Monk confesses that he hates being right all the time, though you'd think it would be the other way around. Later, while Monk is taking a walk outside counting poles, someone in the car tries to run him down, but they miss because Monk randomly turns around because he forgot to count one. So the car swerves and tries to take another shot, meaning Monk has to stop running and dives into an alley somewhere else while still counting. Ironically, this time his OCD saved his life. Go figure. While talking with Mr. Lloyd later, Monk starts, while he's talking, taking shredded paper from the shredder and putting it all together to form the information. Now this makes Mr. Lloyd very nervous, so he starts taking the paper away from Monk. Monk and Sharona confront Goodman later. Mr. Goodman, another assistant for Sinclair, and Goodman is telling them that he went to his lovely cabin recently. However, Monk tells him two things he's sure of. One, he's sure his cabin is lovely, and two, that he was nowhere near his cabin on the day of question. For one thing, his watch is 2 hours ahead, indicating that he had travelled in the opposite direction from his cabin. It then comes to light that, surprise surprise, Mr. Goodman has been hooking up with the mayor's wife. They go to the sniper's home, and when they're yelling for him to come out slowly, a guy comes out sat in a wheelchair. Whoopsie! Apparently he bought a scope for his father, who now hunts alone. After they come out of the apartment, Monk looks at the captain's shoes and says, "Your shoes are scuffed." And the captain says, "Yeah, I know, because unlike you actually wear them a lot." And Monk says, "No, what I mean is, that guy's shoes were scuffed as well, the guy in the wheelchair." That leads to a chase, where Monk notices the sniper coming out of the building, sneaking out. Monk gives chase, only to end up with the guy running up a ladder. Well, not running up, but you get what I mean. Monk chases after him, hesitant at first because it's a dirty ladder, but when he gets up there, he once again accidentally looks down, and his vertigo hits him. So he hugs the ladder for dear life, and the sniper sees this, sees Monk hugging the ladder, and he just casually climbs back down the ladder around Monk saying, "Excuse me," leaving Monk hanging there for his life, which doesn't impress the captain. The captain says, "Wait a minute, you let this guy go because you got dizzy?" And then unfortunately the captain also says, "If you mess up this case, you'll be a leper." Ouch. Next, while Monk is with Sharona and her son, he gets some inspiration from the echo in the car park they're in. Sharona says to Monk, "Wait a minute, you know who the murderer is, don't you?" And Monk says, "Doesn't matter, they won't listen to me now. If I fail this case, I'm a leper." Sharona goes off to collect something. In the following scene, Monk gathers everyone together where the parade took place, and Monk says, "The guy who got shot, the bodyguard, maybe he was the bodyguard who knew too much. That's why he was killed off. So it wasn't meant to be Sinclair who got killed after all. It was the bodyguard." At this point, Monk is still being mocked, because of course. However, the finger now gets pointed at Lloyd. You remember that Muppet, right? The guy who was tussling with Monk beforehand over the boards when the pins got flying everywhere. Lloyd is now panicking, but trying to make it look like he's not panicking, or trying to deflect. And Monk explains that the dead woman at the beginning, Miss Vasquez, Lloyd tried to have paid off, but she happened to have something that was rare: integrity. So she couldn't be paid off. Lloyd then says, "I don't have to listen to this," and tries to walk away. The captain, however, stops him. Also, if you're innocent, why would you be insulted? If you're an innocent man, surely you would be okay with the truth coming out, right? So Lloyd had Vasquez killed, and then he had to have the bodyguard killed off as well to finish the job, you know, tying up loose ends. So he made it look like an assassination attempt gone wrong. Hence why people were supposed to think it was Sinclair who was supposed to get killed and not the bodyguard. But the intended target was the bodyguard. Are you with me so far? To prove Lloyd paid the killer, Monk shows him a picture where only Lloyd is pointing at where the sniper would have been. In other words, only Lloyd would have known exactly where the sniper was at the time of the shooting. Lloyd claims that he easily saw him. Monk, however, points out that there were tall balloons obscuring the view of the buildings. So then Lloyd switches to the excuse, "Well, everyone heard the shot." Monk then says, "Okay, then find Sharona. She's got a starter pistol and she is somewhere in one of these windows, in one of these buildings. Where is the shot being fired from?" And that is where the echo comes in. Remember I said before, in the parking area, there was a big echo that gave Monk inspiration. This is where the inspiration comes in, because when Sharona fires the shots twice, it causes a huge echo throughout all the buildings. Lloyd predictably can't tell where the shots came from, despite the fact that a few seconds earlier he used that as an excuse that he could tell where the shots came from, so he was safe. Not quite. And that's when Lloyd finally admits it and drops the cocky act. Well done, Lloyd, we're so proud. Lloyd was worried that Vasquez was going to expose him, and because he couldn't pay her off, he had her killed instead. I mean, that's how it works, right? If you can't pay someone off, just have him killed. Why not? After that, there's another shot. Monk says stop firing, Sharona, but it's not Sharona. And this time, the shot gets Lloyd in the arm. Apparently, the shooter has come back over a contract dispute. But how did they get this guy? Sharona pursues him down in the sewer. Nice. And gets caught as a hostage herself. There's a cliche. Monk, however, in order to go down into the sewer, gets out handkerchiefs so he can slowly proceed down the dirty ladder. And I'm guessing that these days he would have a ton of hand sanitizer ready to use and just empty the whole bottle into his hand after he'd done that. But handkerchiefs are just as handy. So basically we have a germaphobe in the sewer surrounded by filthy water and a nasty smell. Well done, writers. You're giving Monk a really bad day here, aren't you? And to make things just a bit more fun, a rat lands on Monk. Monk is about to fire at the shooter, but when he does, he gets covered in sewer water, making him drop his gun, which means Monk now has to ignore his anxiety, put his hand in the filthy water and pull his dirty, dripping wet gun out. Not Monk's best day. Oh yeah, and on top of that, everything goes pitch black, which means Monk now has to aim in the dark. That's the only way to stop this guy at this point, apparently. But to wrap things up, and for plot convenience, Monk shoots and he actually gets the guy. I mean, usually when you say, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, you mean I'm going to take a guess. Not literally shoot someone in the dark. But Monk does, and he succeeds. And after that, Monk gets a big thank you from Sinclair. How's that for a big change? The therapist tells Monk that he's made some good progress, but in order to really progress more, he'll have to go through a few more tests. The lift opens to a woman who's coughing her head off. And Monk, of course, doesn't want to get into the lift. He instead looks at his therapist, and the therapist says, see you next week. The episode ends with Monk walking across the bridge into the distance with Sharona, once again doing his OCD counting thing. I thought this was a really good start to the show. There was a good blend of comedy, along with telling a compelling detective story, while showing how someone can be severely affected by OCD and anxiety. I look forward to seeing where this goes. In the meantime, take care, bye for now.